Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always excited to dig into something new.
Today, we're going down a fascinating uh, rabbit hole, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
We're talking about the coincidences surrounding the GameStop saga.
Coincidences, huh? I like that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but we'll get there.
We've got some really interesting material to work with for this one.
Right. We're using Reddit posts, which is always a wild ride. And to make things even more interesting, we're going to try to use an analytical report on Jung's theory of synchronicity.
Oh, wow. That's a fascinating combination. So we're talking meaningful coincidences, those events that seem connected but maybe don't have a direct cause and effect relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have you ever had that thing where you think of someone and then they call you out of the blue?
Oh, all the time. It's so weird.
Right. It's like, what are the chances? And the GameStop saga seems to be full of these kinds of moments.
So where do we even begin with this?
Well, let's start with something pretty basic.
Huh.
Names and initials.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we've got Keith Gill, roaring kitty, right?
Yeah, of course.
And then there's Ken Griffin, CEO of Citadel.
Okay.
Both of them, their initials are KG.
Huh. You know, I never really thought about that.
Yeah, it's one of those things you kind of notice and you're like, interesting.
Especially with all the emotional intensity surrounding the whole GameStop situation, people start looking for those kinds of connections.
For sure. And it just adds to the mystery,
Absolutely.
Oh, and speaking of mysteries, we can't forget about the whole cat thing.
The cat thing.
Yeah, I remember during the congressional hearing, Keith Gill under oath says, "I am not a cat." So it becomes this huge meme. But here's the thing. In the financial world, CAT stands for the Consolidated Audit Trail.
Mm.
It's the system designed to, track stock trades and prevent market manipulation. The very thing some people think happened with GameStop.
Whoa, that's layers upon layers of irony right there.
Right, it's like, come on, universe, what are you trying to tell us?
The story just gets richer and richer.
And you know what else is interesting? The names of the companies involved.
Oh, yeah. Like how?
Well, you've got Overstock, right? They dealt with surplus goods.
Mm-hmm.
And some people accuse them of having, overstocked stock.
Makes sense.
Then there's GameStop, which becomes like this symbolic arena where the whole game of stock trading was, flipped on its head.
I see where you're going with this.
And then Bed Bath & Beyond, trying to move beyond its traditional retail model.
It's like the names themselves were foreshadowing the events.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it like that.
Maybe we're looking too much into it, but it really speaks to how we perceive those synchronicities. We try and make sense of things, find patterns, even in something as simple as a name.
Totally. And that brings us to, I think, the king of coincidences, Ryan Cohen.
Oh, he's definitely at the center of this whole thing.
Right. Chairman of the board, the guy who kind of orchestrated the whole turnaround.
The architect, I've heard some call him.
That's a good one. And his last name, Cohen, it means priest or leader in Hebrew.
No way, seriously.
Yeah, it's wild. And then you've got the timing of his stock purchases and public statements. It's like they often coincided with GameStop coming under attack from, those short sellers.
It's almost too perfect. Like it was all planned.
And don't forget about Chewy, another company he was involved with, another comeback kid. It's that classic underdog story, triumphing against the odds.
Yeah, and that story resonates, especially in this context.
It's powerful stuff. And even the language that retail investors started using, it's almost biblical.
How so?
Diamond hands, right.
Yeah.
It symbolizes this unwavering determination. And HODL, it became like a battle cry, like this commitment to the cause.
Yeah, it's like they were taking a sacred oath.
It went way beyond just buying and selling stock.
It was about being part of something bigger, a shared mission, a movement almost.
A movement fueled by belief and, honestly, a little bit of defiance.
I mean, can you blame them? Think about the institutions involved. You've got Robinhood, right? The name itself symbolizes empowering the little guy.
Yeah, but then they restricted trading on GameStop right when things were getting intense.
Talk about irony.
Right. It just adds fuel to the fire. And then there are the dark pools, those secretive exchanges where who knows what's going on.
Just the name evokes this sense of hidden agendas and manipulation.
And it makes the whole thing feel even more like a movie,
Yeah, it's like we're watching this drama unfold in real time.
With real heroes and villains.
Exactly. And speaking of drama, we can't forget about the numbers.
Oh, the numbers. It's like GameStop was hitting these meme-related price points, like $69 and $420, with uncanny regularity.
It's like it was orchestrated.
Right. And some people even found meaning in those number sequences like 147, 741, 174. They connected them to like gematria or specific dates related to the whole GameStop thing.
Wow. It's amazing how people find meaning in these, like, seemingly random patterns.
It's like our brains are wired to look for connections, especially in times of uncertainty.
It's a human thing, I guess.
And then there's the timing of everything. I mean, talk about coincidences.
Like what?
Okay, so January 27, 2021, FTX starts trading tokenized shares of GameStop. The very next day, GameStop hits its all-time high, and then boom, massive shorting event.
Wow, the timing is, yeah, that's pretty wild.
It's almost too much to be a coincidence. And then you've got Vlad Tenev, the Robinhood CEO, testifying before Congress.
Yeah.
And he instantly becomes evil Vlad in the eyes of, like, everyone on Reddit.
I mean, his name was already Vlad.
I know, right? Talk about a meme waiting to happen. Vlad the Impaler, accused of betraying the little guy.
It's like it was written in the stars.
And it all feeds into this, like, this epic narrative, this battle between good and evil.
Yeah, it's tapping into those deep-seated archetypes that Jung talked about. The GameStop saga becomes like a modern-day David versus Goliath.
Totally. The little guy challenging the financial giant.
So rebels fighting the empire.
Yeah, and people see themselves in that story. They want to see the underdog win.
They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
Something meaningful.
Something with a purpose.
And that's where those figures like Elon Musk and Mark Cuban come in.
Oh, yeah, they kind of jumped on the bandwagon, didn't they?
Elon tweets GameStonk right in the middle of everything. It's like a signal boost from someone who, like, represents disruption and innovation.
And then you've got Mark Cuban publicly supporting those retail investors.
It gives the whole thing legitimacy, you know? Like, even these, like, titans of industry are recognizing the power of this movement.
It's like they're saying, hey, we're on your side.
And it just adds to the sense that something truly extraordinary is happening.
Something magical almost.
And some people are experiencing that magic firsthand. They're realizing their usernames have these unintentional but meaningful connections to the whole saga. Or they're having these interactions on forums that seem to align with, like, key dates or events.
It's like the universe is speaking directly to them.
It's wild, right? And that feeling, that sense of personal significance, it's what keeps people coming back to the GameStop story.
They're searching for answers, for meaning, for connection.
And maybe, just maybe, they're finding it.
It's like we're all tapping into this collective unconscious that Jung talked about. But what does it all mean? What can we learn from this crazy collection of coincidences? It really is like we've stumbled upon a modern myth with this GameStop thing.
A myth, huh? I like that.
It's got all the elements, you know? Those larger-than-life characters, those battles between good and evil, and this, like, collective desire to see the underdog win.
Yeah, it's like we're watching a story unfold in real time, and people are getting swept up in it.
It makes you think about, like, the power of stories, how they shape our understanding of the world.
Right, like those classic myths, the hero's journeys. We keep telling those stories because they resonate with us on some deep level.
Exactly. They tap into something fundamental about the human experience, and I think the GameStop saga is doing the same thing.
So are you saying that Jung's theory of synchronicity can actually explain what happened with GameStop?
Well, it's not so much about explaining it in, like, a scientific sense.
Okay, so it's not like cause and effect.
Right. Synchronicity is about recognizing those moments when the inner and outer worlds align in a way that feels meaningful, even if there's no logical explanation.
So it's more about the feeling those moments evoke, like that aha moment when you realize something's connected in a way you didn't expect.
Exactly. It's that feeling of connection, of meaning, of something bigger than ourselves. And with GameStop, those coincidences have created a shared mythology that people are really drawn to.
So even if some of those coincidences are just, random occurrences, the fact that people are perceiving them as meaningful is what's important.
Absolutely. Synchronicity is a subjective experience. It's about the individual's perception of meaning, not necessarily some objective truth.
And that perception can influence behavior, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. In the case of GameStop, those coincidences likely reinforced a lot of people's beliefs, encouraged them to hold on to the stock even when things got volatile.
It's like those coincidences became self-fulfilling prophecies.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The power of belief. How it can actually shape reality.
It's almost like we're co-creating our reality with our thoughts and beliefs.
I think that's a big part of it, and the GameStop story is a great example of that.
But are we just at the mercy of random events and how we interpret them?
Not necessarily. We can't control everything that happens, but we can choose how we respond. We can dismiss coincidences as mere chance, or we can explore them.
Explore them, like try to figure out what they mean.
Exactly. And that exploration can lead to some really interesting insights.
So even if we're not like believers in synchronicity, it can still have an impact on us.
Absolutely. Our minds are constantly looking for patterns, making connections, and sometimes those connections lead us down unexpected paths.
And that's where things can get really interesting. It's like that Jung quote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Exactly. The GameStop saga is a perfect example of how those unconscious forces can manifest in our lives.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So we're not saying our listeners should go out and start seeing conspiracies everywhere.
Not at all. It's more about cultivating a sense of curiosity, paying attention to those little details, the unexpected connections, the things that make you go, huh, that's weird.
Like when you find a $20 bill on the ground right when you need it.
Exactly. Those moments happen all the time. It's just a matter of whether we notice them or not.
So it's about being open to the possibility that there might be something more going on than we realize.
Exactly. And remember, synchronicity often works in the language of symbols and metaphors.
Symbols and metaphors.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
those recurring themes in your dreams or the books you're drawn to, the conversations that keep popping up. Those could be messages from your unconscious trying to guide you.
And those messages might be easier to hear when we're in like a heightened emotional state.
Absolutely. Jung noticed that synchronicities often happen during times of transition, upheaval, or intense emotional experiences.
Which makes sense with the GameStop thing, right? I mean, that whole saga has been super emotionally charged for a lot of people.
Exactly. It's created this collective energy that's amplified those perceptions of synchronicity.
So it's not just about individual experiences, there's like a collective aspect to it as well.
I think so. It's like we're all connected in ways we don't fully understand. And the GameStop story has brought that connection to the surface.
Wow, this is a lot to process. We've gone from meme stocks to the collective unconscious, from financial markets to the nature of reality itself.
It's been quite a journey, and we're not even done yet.
There's still more to explore.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked about the symbolic language, the mythic narrative, the collective unconscious. But what does it all mean for us, for the everyday person trying to make sense of the world?
So much to unpack here, but I think a big question for our listeners is, like, what can we learn from all this? Like, how does this apply to, everyday life?
I think one of the most powerful takeaways is that belief can shape reality. When enough people come together and believe in something, it can have a real impact on the world around them.
It's like, if you believe it, it will come true.
Kind of, yeah. And the GameStop thing just takes it to a whole other level. It's suggesting that belief can even affect the financial markets, which is like wild when you think about it because they're supposed to be driven by, logic and data.
So are you saying the market is just a big placebo effect?
No, it's not that simple. Obviously, there are real factors that affect prices, but we can't ignore the power of psychology, Emotions, beliefs, those things can have a huge influence on how the market moves.
It makes you wonder how much of, like, our reality is just a reflection of our beliefs.
It's a deep question, right?
Yeah.
Philosophers have been debating that for centuries. And the GameStop story is just like a tiny example of this much bigger phenomenon.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? Should we all be looking for, like, signs and coincidences everywhere?
It's not so much about actively looking for them. It's more about, like, being open to the unexpected. Noticing those moments that make you pause and think.
Like when you think of someone and then they call you.
Yeah, exactly. Or when you, like, lose your keys and then you find them in the most obvious spot.
Oh, yeah, that happens to me all the time.
We all experience those moments, right? The question is, how do we respond to them? Do we just dismiss them as chance, or do we think about what they might mean?
So it's about, like, paying attention to those synchronicities and then maybe, like, asking ourselves, okay, what can I learn from this?
Exactly. And remember, synchronicity often speaks in symbols and metaphors.
Symbols and metaphors, like how?
Pay attention to those recurring themes in your dreams, the books you're drawn to, the conversations that seem to keep popping up. It could be your unconscious trying to tell you something.
And I imagine that being in a certain emotional state, like being really stressed or excited, could make us more receptive to those messages.
Yeah, for sure. You notice that synchronicities often happen during times of big change or emotional upheaval. It's like when things are uncertain, we're more open to those like subtle nudges from the universe.
So in a way, the GameStop thing, with all that emotion and uncertainty, it was like the perfect breeding ground for all those coincidences.
Absolutely. It created this like collective energy that amplified those perceptions of synchronicity. It's like those Redditors were all tuned into the same frequency, picking up on those subtle signals.
It's almost like they were part of something bigger than themselves.
I think they were.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing. It shows us that we're all connected in ways we don't fully understand.
This has been, wow, this has been quite a deep dive, from meme stocks to the collective unconscious. It's like we've traveled through like 5 different dimensions of reality.
It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. And I hope it's inspired our listeners to think a little differently about the world, to pay attention to those synchronicities in their own lives.
Yeah. Maybe there's a coincidence waiting right around the corner for them. Who knows?
The universe works in mysterious ways.
Well, on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of coincidences. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your minds curious.